She wasn't supposed to survive out here alone, but when her daughter ran toward her in pure terror, chased by a silent Comanche warrior emerging from the trees, everything changed. What he did next wasn't an attack. It was something no one in the West had ever imagined, and it would alter the future of everyone involved. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty frontier town of Broken Creek in the summer of 1867. Sarah Mitchell wiped the sweat from her brow as she stood on the wooden porch of her modest homestead, her emerald eyes scanning the horizon with growing unease. At 24 years old, she had already weathered more hardships than most women twice her age. Her husband had died 2 years earlier from cholera, leaving her alone to raise their 7-year-old daughter, Emma, on this unforgiving land. Sarah's long auburn hair was tied back in a practical bun, and her calloused hands told the story of endless days spent tending to the small ranch, fixing fences, and trying to coax crops from the stubborn Texas soil. The war had ended only 2 years ago, but the frontier remained a dangerous place. Comanche raids were becoming more frequent, as the tribe fought desperately to hold on to their ancestral lands, against the relentless push of settlers moving westward. Sarah had heard the stories from other homesteaders who gathered at the general store in town. Tales of swift attacks, stolen livestock, and families torn apart. She kept a rifle by the door and had taught herself to shoot, though the thought of actually having to use it against another human being filled her with dread. Emma was playing in the yard, her blonde curls bouncing as she chased butterflies near the vegetable garden. The little girl's laughter was the only bright spot in Sarah's difficult life, a reminder of why she fought so hard to keep this piece of land that her late husband had claimed. The child was innocent, unaware of the dangers that lurked beyond their property line, and Sarah intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. "Mama, look at this one," Emma called out, pointing at a large orange butterfly that had landed on a sunflower. "It's so pretty." Sarah smiled despite her worry, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. But don't wander too far from the house, you hear me?" "Yes, Mama," Emma replied, though her attention was already captured by another butterfly. Sarah turned back to her work, carrying a basket of laundry to hang on the line strung between 2 posts. The mundane task helped calm her nerves, the rhythmic motion of pinning wet clothes to the rope providing a meditative quality. She had just hung the last of Emma's dresses when she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. It was Emma's scream, high-pitched and terrified, cutting through the afternoon air like a knife. "Mama! Mama!" Sarah dropped the basket and ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She rounded the corner of the house and saw Emma sprinting toward her, her little legs pumping as fast as they could, tears streaming down her face. Behind the child, emerging from the tree line about 100 yards away, was a figure on horseback. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a Comanche warrior, his copper skin gleaming in the sunlight, his long black hair flowing behind him as he sat motionless on a paint horse. He wore traditional clothing, buckskin leggings and a breechcloth, and his muscular chest was bare except for a bone breastplate. His face was painted with war markings, stark white and black lines that made him appear otherworldly and terrifying. In his hand, he held a lance decorated with feathers and horsehair. Emma crashed into Sarah's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mama, I was so scared. He just appeared out of nowhere." Sarah clutched her daughter tightly, her mind racing. She glanced toward the house, calculating the distance to the rifle by the door. It was too far. If she ran now with Emma, they might not make it. The warrior could close the distance on his horse in seconds. Her mouth went dry as she considered their options, each one seeming more hopeless than the last. But something strange happened. The warrior didn't charge. He didn't raise his weapon or let out a war cry. He simply sat there on his horse, watching them. Sarah's eyes met his across the distance, and she was struck by how young he looked, probably no older than herself. His dark eyes were intense, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't the look of a man preparing to attack. It was something else entirely. Long minutes passed, each second feeling like an eternity. Sarah's arms ached from holding Emma so tightly, but she didn't dare move. The warrior's horse shifted its weight, snorting softly, but the rider remained perfectly still. Then, slowly, he raised his hand, not in aggression, but in what appeared to be a gesture of peace, his palm facing forward. Sarah's mind whirled with confusion. What did this mean? Was it a trick? She had heard that Comanche warriors were fierce and ruthless, but she had also heard stories from old-timers who spoke of their honor and their complex code of conduct. This man didn't look like he wanted to hurt them, but how could she be sure? Emma's sobbing had quieted to soft whimpers. "Mama, what does he want?" "I don't know, baby," Sarah whispered, never taking her eyes off the warrior. "Just stay very still." The warrior lowered his hand and reached behind him, pulling something from a pack attached to his horse. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat, expecting a weapon, but instead he held up a wooden doll. It was beautifully crafted, decorated with beads and feathers clearly made for a child. He held it up for a moment, then gently tossed it forward so that it landed in the grass about halfway between them. Then, without a word, without any further gesture, the warrior turned his horse and disappeared back into the trees as silently as he had appeared. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Emma pulled away slightly to look up at her mother's face. "Mama, why did he leave that doll?" Sarah shook her head slowly, her eyes still fixed on the spot where the warrior had vanished. "I don't know, Emma. I truly don't know." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by the window with her rifle across her lap, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. The doll sat on the kitchen table where she had placed it after carefully retrieving it from the yard. Emma had wanted to play with it, but Sarah had said no. Not yet. Not until she understood what it meant. The craftsmanship was exquisite. Whoever had made this doll had done so with great care and skill. The face was painted with delicate features, and the tiny dress was made from soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. It was clearly valuable, not something to be given away lightly. Sarah's thoughts turned to the warrior himself. She couldn't shake the image of his face from her mind. Those dark eyes had held something she hadn't expected: intelligence, depth, and perhaps even sadness. He had been close enough that she could have seen hatred or cruelty if it were there, but she had seen neither. Instead, she had seen a man, not a monster. This realization troubled her more than she cared to admit. As dawn broke over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah finally allowed herself to close her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept returning to the same questions over and over. Who was he? Why had he let them go? What did the doll mean? And most troubling of all, why did she feel compelled to know the answers? 3 days passed without incident, but Sarah found herself constantly looking toward the tree line, half expecting to see the warrior again. She couldn't explain the strange pull she felt, the curiosity that gnawed at her despite every rational thought telling her to be afraid. She had ridden into town the morning after the encounter to speak with Sheriff Tom Brady, a grizzled veteran of the Indian Wars who had seen more than his share of conflict. "You say he just left a doll and rode away?" The sheriff had scratched his gray beard, his weathered face creasing with confusion. "That's mighty peculiar, Mrs. Mitchell. Comanche don't usually leave gifts for settlers. More often than not, they're raiding for supplies or horses, or worse." "I know what I saw, Sheriff," Sarah had insisted, her green eyes flashing with certainty. "He had every opportunity to attack us, but he didn't. He seemed peaceful." The sheriff had leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "I've been out here 20 years, ma'am, and I've learned that the Comanche are more complicated than most folks give them credit for. They got their own ways, their own honor codes. Maybe you stumbled onto something you don't quite understand yet. My advice? Keep that rifle close and your doors locked at night, but don't go looking for trouble where there might not be any." Sarah had thanked him and returned home, but his words had done little to ease her mind. She found herself examining the doll repeatedly, turning it over in her hands, wondering about the person who had made it. The beadwork showed incredible patience and skill. Each tiny bead was perfectly placed, creating geometric patterns that seemed to tell a story she couldn't read. Emma had finally been allowed to play with the doll, and she had named it Little Bird. The child carried it everywhere, talking to it constantly, creating elaborate stories about where it had come from. Sarah watched her daughter with a mixture of love and concern, wondering if she had made the right decision in letting Emma keep it. On the fourth day, Sarah was drawing water from the well when she heard hoofbeats. Her hand instinctively went to the pistol she now kept tucked in her belt, but when she looked up, she saw it wasn't the Comanche warrior. Instead, it was John Preston, a neighboring rancher whose property bordered hers to the east. John was a handsome man of 30, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He had been courting Sarah for the past 6 months, bringing her supplies and offering to help with repairs around her homestead. "Morning, Sarah," he called out, tipping his hat as he dismounted from his chestnut mare. "Thought I'd ride over and check on you and Emma. Heard some concerning talk in town about Comanche being spotted in the area." Sarah set down the bucket and wiped her hands on her apron. "We're fine, John. Thank you for your concern." John stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Sarah, I know you're a strong woman, and I admire that about you. But this is dangerous country for a woman alone with a child. I've been wanting to talk to you about something important." He reached out and took her hand gently. "I'd like you to consider becoming my wife. I can give you and Emma protection, a real home. You wouldn't have to struggle anymore." Sarah looked at John's kind face and felt a pang of guilt. He was a good man, stable and dependable. Any sensible woman in her position would accept his proposal without hesitation. But something held her back, some indefinable feeling that she couldn't quite name. "John, I need more time. This is all very sudden." "Sudden?" John's face showed his confusion. "Sarah, I've been coming around for half a year now. I thought you understood my intentions." I do," Sarah said quickly, pulling her hand back. "It's just that there's been a lot happening, and I need to think clearly. Please give me a little more time." John's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "All right, Sarah, I'll give you time, but I won't wait forever. A man has his pride, and there are other women in this territory who would be grateful for what I'm offering." After John left, Sarah felt unsettled. She knew she should feel grateful for his interest, but instead, she felt trapped. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, she sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The night air was cool and carried the scent of sage and juniper. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere an owl called out to the darkness. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the figure standing at the edge of her property, barely visible in the moonlight. Her heart jumped, and her hand moved to the rifle leaning against the porch rail. But then she recognized the silhouette, the proud bearing, the long hair, the broad shoulders. It was him, the Comanche warrior. Sarah stood slowly, her pulse racing. Every instinct told her to raise the rifle, to fire a warning shot, to run inside and bar the door. But instead, she found herself walking toward him, her feet moving almost of their own accord. She stopped about 20 feet away, close enough to see his features in the pale moonlight, but far enough to run if needed. They stood there in silence for a long moment, studying each other. Up close, without the war paint, she could see his face more clearly. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline. His dark eyes held an intelligence that surprised her, and there was something deeply sad in them that resonated with her own hidden grief. Finally he spoke. "You kept the doll." His English was accented but clear, his voice deep and resonant. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You speak English?" "My mother was captured by your people when she was young," he explained, his expression carefully neutral. "She lived with the whites for 5 years before returning to our people. She taught me your language." He paused, then added, "My name is Dakota. It means friend to everyone." "I'm Sarah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you give my daughter that doll? Why didn't you attack us?" Dakota's gaze shifted to the house behind her, then back to her face. "The doll belonged to my daughter. She died last winter from the white man's sickness. Fever took her when she was 7 summers old." His voice remained steady, but Sarah could hear the pain beneath the words. "When I saw your little one running, with her yellow hair shining in the sun, for a moment I thought I saw my Ayana again. I could not harm her. I could not harm you." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I lost my husband 2 years ago. I know what it is to grieve. Yes, Dakota said softly. I saw the sadness in your eyes that day. We are both warriors fighting to survive, you and I. Different people, same pain. They talked for hours that night, standing in the moonlit yard. Dakota told her about his people, about how they were being pushed from their lands, how the buffalo herds were disappearing, how his tribe was struggling to maintain their way of life against the unstoppable tide of settlers. He spoke of his wife, who had died giving birth to their second child, a son who had lived only 3 days. He spoke of his losses with dignity, never asking for pity, simply sharing the truth of his existence. Sarah, in turn, found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone since her husband's death. She told him about the loneliness of frontier life, about the constant fear and struggle, about how she sometimes felt like she was drowning, but had to keep swimming for Emma's sake. She told him about the pressure from John Preston and other men in town who thought she should remarry, should give up her independence for the safety of a husband's protection. You are strong, Dakota said when she finished. Like the oak tree that bends in the wind but does not break. Your daughter is lucky to have such a mother. Emma loves the doll, Sarah told him, a small smile crossing her face. She calls it Little Bird. She carries it everywhere and talks to it constantly. I think maybe your daughter's spirit would be happy to know it brings joy to another child. Dakota nodded slowly. This is good. Ayanna loved that doll. She would want it to be loved again. As dawn began to break, casting the first gray light across the plains, Dakota prepared to leave. But before he went, he turned back to Sarah. I will come again, if you permit it. These meetings must stay secret. If your people knew, they would hunt me. If my people knew, they would see it as betrayal. But I feel as though the spirits brought us together for a reason. Sarah knew she should say no. She knew that any relationship with a Comanche warrior was impossible, dangerous, and could get them both killed. But looking into his eyes, seeing the same loneliness and pain that lived in her own heart, she found herself nodding. Come back tomorrow night. Same time. But please, be careful. If anyone sees you, I am Comanche, Dakota said with the hint of a smile. I move like the wind. No one will see me unless I wish it. And then he was gone, disappearing into the lightning dawn like smoke. Sarah stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. What was she doing? This was madness. But it was also the most alive she had felt in 2 years, and she couldn't deny the connection she felt to this man who should have been her enemy. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and whispered conversations. Dakota came every night, always after Emma was asleep, always careful to remain hidden in the shadows. Sarah found herself living for those meetings, counting the hours until darkness fell, and she could slip out to the edge of her property where he waited. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, the vastly different worlds they came from, that somehow seemed less different with each passing night. Dakota taught her words in his language, and she taught him more English phrases. He told her stories of his people's history, of the great hunts and the sacred ceremonies, of a way of life that was slowly dying. Sarah shared her own stories of growing up in Missouri, of the journey west with her husband, of the hopes they had carried that were cut short by illness and hardship. With each conversation, the walls between them crumbled a little more, until Sarah could no longer remember why they were supposed to be enemies. My people call this land Comancheria, Dakota explained one night as they sat by the creek that ran through Sarah's property, their voices low and careful. We have lived here for generations, following the buffalo, living in harmony with the earth. Now the buffalo disappear, killed by your hunters for sport, left to rot on the plains. My people starve while your people take more and more land. Sarah felt the weight of his words, the injustice of it all. I wish things were different. I wish there was a way for both our peoples to live in peace, to share this land instead of fighting over it. That is a beautiful dream, Dakota said, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. But I do not think your leaders want peace. They want all the land, and they will not stop until my people are gone or broken. The sadness in his voice broke Sarah's heart. She reached out hesitantly and placed her hand on his. The touch sent electricity through both of them, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Dakota turned his hand over, intertwining his fingers with hers, and Sarah felt something shift between them, a crossing of an invisible line from friendship into something deeper, something that both terrified and thrilled her. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this is wrong in the eyes of both our peoples, but when I am with you, I feel peace for the first time since I lost my family. You have awakened something in my heart I thought had died." Sarah's breath caught. She knew she should pull away, should end this before it went any further, but she couldn't. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I try to tell myself it's impossible, that we're from different worlds, that there's no future for us. But my heart doesn't listen to reason anymore." Dakota lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture so tender that tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. "Then let us have this time together, however long the spirits allow. Let us not think of tomorrow, only of now." But tomorrow came whether they wanted it or not, and it brought trouble with it. John Preston had been growing increasingly suspicious of Sarah's behavior. She had been distracted, distant, turning down his invitations to Sunday dinners and church socials. He had ridden past her property several times in the early morning hours and noticed fresh hoofprints that didn't match any horse he recognized. His jealousy and frustration had been building, and he was determined to find out what Sarah was hiding. It was a Thursday evening when everything came crashing down. John had been watching Sarah's property from a distance, hidden in a grove of cottonwood trees. He saw the Comanche warrior approach, saw Sarah emerge from her house, and walk toward him with obvious familiarity. Rage flooded through John's veins as he watched them embrace, the moonlight illuminating their figures clearly. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. The next morning, John rode into town and went straight to the sheriff's office. "Tom, we've got a serious problem," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Sarah Mitchell is consorting with a Comanche warrior. I saw them with my own eyes last night, meeting on her property like lovers." Sheriff Brady's expression turned grim. "John, that's a serious accusation. Are you absolutely certain of what you saw?" "I know what I saw," John insisted, slamming his fist on the desk. "She's been acting strange for weeks, and now I know why. That savage has been coming to her property at night. God knows what else has been happening. We need to do something before she puts the whole community at risk." The sheriff stood and reached for his hat. "All right, I'll ride out there and talk to her. But John, you need to keep this quiet for now. If word gets out, it could start a panic, or worse, it could provoke an attack from either side." But keeping it quiet proved impossible. By noon, the story had spread through Broken Creek like wildfire. The townspeople were shocked and outraged. A white woman fraternizing with a Comanche warrior was seen as the ultimate betrayal, a danger to the entire community. Some called for Sarah to be driven out of town. Others wanted the warrior hunted down and killed. The peaceful coexistence that had been tentatively maintained was suddenly on the verge of collapse. Sarah knew nothing of the storm brewing in town until the sheriff arrived at her homestead that afternoon, with John Preston and 3 other men. She was hanging laundry when she saw them riding up, and her heart sank. She knew immediately that they had found out about Dakota. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sheriff Brady said gravely as he dismounted, "we need to talk about some serious allegations that have been made against you." Sarah's chin lifted defiantly. "What allegations would those be, Sheriff?" "That you've been meeting with a Comanche warrior on your property," the sheriff said, watching her face carefully. "That you've been putting this entire community at risk by harboring the enemy." "He's not my enemy," Sarah said firmly, her green eyes flashing. "And he's not yours either if you just take the time to know him. His name is Dakota, and he's a man who has lost everything: his wife, his children, his way of life. He's not a threat to anyone." John stepped forward, his face red with anger and hurt. "How can you say that, Sarah? He's a savage. I offered you protection, a real future, and you threw it away for him." "I never accepted your proposal, John," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "And I never gave you any false hope. What I do on my own property is my business, not when it endangers the rest of us," one of the other men growled. "We got families to protect. You bring that Comanche around here, and next thing you know, we'll have a whole war party attacking us." Sheriff Brady held up his hand for silence. "Sarah, I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. The townspeople are scared and angry. Some are calling for action against you and this warrior. I'm trying to keep things calm, but I need your cooperation. You have to promise me you'll stop these meetings." "I won't make that promise," Sarah said quietly but firmly. "I'm not doing anything wrong. Dakota and I have done nothing but talk. We've shared our stories, our pain, our hope for peace. If that's a crime, then your laws are unjust." The sheriff's expression softened slightly. He had always respected Sarah's strength, even if he didn't understand her choices. "Sarah, please think of Emma. Think of what this could mean for her future. You're not just risking your own safety, you're risking hers too." That hit home. Sarah's resolve wavered as she thought of her daughter sleeping peacefully inside the house, innocent and unaware of the danger surrounding them. But before she could respond, a voice called out from behind the group of men. "She speaks the truth. I am no threat to your people." Everyone spun around to see Dakota standing at the edge of the property, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He wore no war paint, carried no weapons except a knife at his belt. He walked forward slowly, his bearing proud and unafraid despite being outnumbered and surrounded. The men reached for their guns, but Sheriff Brady held up his hand again. "Nobody shoots unless I give the order. Let's hear what he has to say." Dakota stopped about 15 feet away, his dark eyes moving from face to face before settling on Sarah. In that look she saw everything: his love for her, his fear for her safety, his resignation to whatever fate awaited him. "I am Dakota, son of Napaishni, of the Penateka band. I came to this woman's home because I saw in her the same grief I carried in my own heart. We have shared our stories, nothing more. I have not harmed her or her daughter. I would die before allowing harm to come to them." John laughed bitterly. "You expect us to believe that? A Comanche warrior who just wants to talk? What about all the raids, all the settlers who've been killed?" "I do not speak for all my people, just as you do not speak for all yours," Dakota replied calmly. "Yes, there have been raids. There have been killings on both sides. My people fight because we are losing everything: our land, our food, our way of life. But I am tired of fighting. I am tired of death. I came here seeking only peace, and I found something more." His eyes returned to Sarah, and the emotion in them was unmistakable. The men saw it too, and several shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they had expected. Not this eloquent, dignified man who spoke of peace and showed such obvious feeling for Sarah. Sheriff Brady cleared his throat. "This is a complicated situation. Dakota, I appreciate your honesty, but you have to understand that your presence here creates problems. There's a lot of fear and mistrust between our peoples. Even if your intentions are good, others might see your meetings with Mrs. Mitchell as some kind of threat or deception." "I understand," Dakota said quietly, "but I will not apologize for finding light in the darkness, for discovering that peace between our peoples is possible if we open our hearts to it." "Pretty words won't change reality," one of the men muttered. "Our people and your people are at war, whether you like it or not." "Then perhaps it is time to change that reality," Dakota said, his voice growing stronger. "I propose something. Let me go to my people and speak with our council. Let Sarah go to your leaders and speak with them. If both sides are willing, perhaps we can arrange a meeting, a true council where we talk instead of fight. The land is big enough for all of us if we choose to share it rather than spill blood over it." The suggestion was met with stunned silence. It was bold, perhaps even crazy, but there was something compelling about it. Sarah stepped forward, standing beside Dakota in a show of solidarity that made John's jaw clench. "He's right," she said passionately. "We can keep killing each other, or we can try something different. I'm willing to go to Fort Richardson and speak with the Army commanders, to plead for a chance at peace. What do we have to lose by trying?" Sheriff Brady removed his hat and ran his hand through his hair, deep in thought. He was a practical man who had seen too much bloodshed in his years on the frontier. The idea of peace, however unlikely, held appeal. "This would have to go higher than me. You'd need to convince not just the townspeople but the military, the territorial government. And Dakota, your people would have to agree as well. That's a tall order." All great changes begin with someone willing to take the first step, Dakota said. I am willing to be that person for my people. And I'm willing to be that person for mine, Sarah added, reaching out to take Dakota's hand in full view of everyone. It was a defiant gesture, a declaration that she would not be ashamed of what they had found together. The following weeks were among the most challenging of Sarah's life. The town was divided. Some supported her bold stand for peace, while others condemned her as a traitor. She faced harsh words and cold shoulders at the general store, and several families who had been friendly before now crossed the street to avoid her. But there were also unexpected allies. Martha Henderson, the schoolteacher, spoke up at a town meeting in support of Sarah's courage. Reverend Thomas, who had lost his own son in a Comanche raid years before, surprised everyone by saying that perhaps God was calling them to forgiveness rather than vengeance. Emma, bless her innocent heart, didn't fully understand what was happening, but she sensed her mother's stress. "Mama, why are people being mean to you?" she asked one evening as Sarah tucked her into bed. Little Bird clutched tightly in her arms. Sarah smoothed her daughter's blonde curls and smiled despite the ache in her heart. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people are afraid of things they don't understand. They think that because someone looks different or lives differently, they must be dangerous. But I'm trying to show them that we're all just people trying to live our lives and take care of the ones we love." "Like Dakota?" Emma asked innocently. Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't realized her daughter knew his name. "I saw him one night from my window. He looked sad, Mama, like you looked after Papa died." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "Yes, exactly like that. He's lost people he loved, just like we lost your Papa. That's why I want to help him, to help both our peoples find a way to live together peacefully." Emma nodded seriously, her young face thoughtful beyond her years. "I think that's good, Mama. Papa used to say that kindness was stronger than anger. I remember that." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she kissed her daughter's forehead. "Your Papa was a wise man. Now go to sleep, my little one. Tomorrow is a big day." Indeed, tomorrow was crucial. After intense negotiations and countless letters exchanged between Sheriff Brady, the military commanders at Fort Richardson, and territorial officials, a meeting had been arranged. It would take place on neutral ground, a valley between Sarah's homestead and the Comanche encampment, under a flag of truce. Dakota had returned to his people and spent days convincing the tribal council to send representatives. It had not been easy. Many warriors wanted nothing to do with the whites, having been betrayed too many times before. But Dakota's passion and his status as a respected warrior who had lost everything to the conflict gave his words weight. "I told them about you," Dakota had whispered to Sarah during one of their secret meetings in the days leading up to the Peace Council. "I told them about a white woman who showed me that not all of your people are greedy and cruel, that some have honor and compassion." My uncle, who leads our band, agreed to come to the meeting. He lost 2 sons to your soldiers, but he is tired of war. He wants to see if peace is truly possible. Now, as the sun rose on the day of the meeting, Sarah stood on her porch wearing her best dress, a simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Her auburn hair was braided and coiled at the nape of her neck. She was terrified, but determined. Sheriff Brady had agreed to escort her to the meeting site, along with a delegation from town that included Reverend Thomas, Martha Henderson, and, surprisingly, John Preston. John had been quiet and withdrawn since the confrontation at Sarah's homestead. His pride had been wounded, but he was not a cruel man. The night before the meeting, he had come to Sarah's home alone. "I want to apologize," he had said, his hat in his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "I let my jealousy and hurt feelings cloud my judgment. I still think you're making a mistake with that warrior, but I can see that you believe in what you're doing. And I can't deny that if there's even a small chance for peace, it's worth pursuing. My brother was killed in a Comanche raid 5 years ago, and I've carried that anger ever since. Maybe it's time to let it go." Sarah had been moved by his words and had thanked him sincerely. Now, as they rode together toward the meeting site, there was a tentative peace between them, if not friendship. The valley was beautiful, carpeted with wildflowers and bordered by rolling hills. A large oak tree stood in the center, ancient and spreading, its branches offering shade. When Sarah's group arrived, they saw that the Comanche delegation was already there. 6 warriors on horseback, their bearing proud and alert. Sarah's heart leapt when she spotted Dakota among them, sitting tall on his paint horse, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. The 2 groups approached slowly, stopping about 20 yards apart. An older Comanche warrior, his face lined with age and wisdom, rode forward. This was Napaishni, Dakota's uncle and the band's leader. Sheriff Brady and Sarah rode forward to meet him, with Dakota translating. "My uncle says that he comes in peace but with caution," Dakota translated as Napaishni spoke in their native tongue. "He has been betrayed by white men before, promised treaties that were broken, given land that was then taken away. He wants to know why this time should be different." Sarah took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "Because this time, it's not governments or armies making promises. It's people. People who have suffered loss, who are tired of burying their loved ones, who want a future for their children that isn't filled with fear and violence. I can't promise to change everything that's wrong between our peoples, but I can promise to stand for what's right, to speak the truth about the Comanche people I've come to know through Dakota, that you are human beings with families, hopes, and dreams, just like us." Dakota translated her words, and Sarah saw something shift in Napaishni's weathered face. The old chief studied her for a long moment, then spoke again. "My uncle says that you speak with a true heart," Dakota translated, his voice thick with emotion. "He says that my nephew has been changed by knowing you, that the darkness that consumed him after losing his family has lifted. He asks what you propose." Sarah glanced at Sheriff Brady, who nodded for her to continue. "We propose a formal treaty of peace between the Comanche bands in this region and the settlements of Broken Creek and the surrounding homesteads. We recognize that this land was yours long before we came, and we ask for the right to share it, not take it. In return, we offer trade, medical supplies, and a voice in the Territorial Council to ensure your people are heard and treated fairly." The translation sparked intense discussion among the Comanche warriors. Voices rose and fell as they debated in their language. Sarah watched anxiously, her hands gripping her reins so tightly her knuckles were white. Everything hung in the balance, not just the peace treaty, but her future with Dakota, the safety of her daughter, the possibility of 2 worlds coming together instead of tearing each other apart. Finally, Napaishni raised his hand for silence and spoke again. Dakota's face broke into a smile as he translated. "My uncle says that he will agree to a trial period of peace, 6 moons, which you call months. During this time, there will be no raids on your settlements, and you will not send soldiers against our camps. We will meet monthly to discuss any problems and work to resolve them. If at the end of 6 moons both sides are satisfied, we will make the peace permanent." Relief flooded through Sarah so powerfully that she felt dizzy. Sheriff Brady extended his hand to Napaishni, who looked at it curiously before understanding the gesture and clasping it firmly. "We accept these terms," the sheriff said solemnly. "On behalf of Broken Creek and the surrounding territory, I pledge to honor this peace and to work toward understanding between our peoples." Reverend Thomas rode forward and offered a prayer, asking for God's blessing on the peace accord and the wisdom to maintain it. Even the Comanche warriors bowed their heads respectfully, and when the prayer was finished, Napaishni spoke words in his own language that Dakota explained were a spiritual blessing from his people. As the formal proceedings concluded and both groups began to relax slightly, Dakota rode over to Sarah, his dark eyes shining with hope and love. "You did it," he said softly, so only she could hear. "You brought peace where there was only hatred." "We did it," Sarah corrected him, her heart overflowing. "Together." "Sarah," Dakota said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I must ask you something important. My uncle has given me permission to leave the tribe if I choose, to make my own path, and I choose to be with you if you will have me. I know it will not be easy. Many of your people will never accept us, and some of mine will see it as betrayal. But I love you, Sarah Mitchell. I love your strength, your courage, your kind heart. I love the way you see past the surface to the person beneath. Will you let me stand beside you, to build a life together?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she looked at this remarkable man, who had somehow found her in the vastness of the Texas plains, who had seen her loneliness and matched it with his own, who had the courage to cross every boundary to be with her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Dakota. I love you too. I think I've loved you since that first day, when you could have hurt us but chose peace instead." Around them, people were watching, some with approval, some with disapproval, but Sarah didn't care anymore. She had spent 2 years living in fear and loneliness, and now she had found something precious and rare. She wouldn't let it go for anyone. The next few months were transformative for everyone involved. The peace held shakily at first, but growing stronger with each passing week. The monthly meetings between the Comanche representatives and the town leaders became opportunities for real dialogue and understanding. Trade began between the groups, the Comanche offering beautifully tanned hides and expertly crafted goods in exchange for flour, sugar, and medical supplies. A few brave souls on both sides even began to form tentative friendships. Dakota moved into Sarah's homestead, and together they worked the land. He taught her tracking skills and how to read the signs of nature, while she taught him more about farming and how to read and write English more fluently. Emma adored Dakota, and he was gentle and patient with her, often carving her small toys or telling her stories of the animal spirits that his people revered. The child had gained not just peace, but a father figure who loved her as his own. The town's acceptance came slowly but surely. When a harsh winter storm struck and several families were in danger of starving, Dakota led a group of Comanche hunters who shared their stores of dried meat and showed the settlers how to find edible roots and plants. That act of generosity did more to change hearts than any words could have. By spring, when Sarah and Dakota stood before Reverend Thomas to be married in a ceremony that blended both their traditions, more than half the town attended. Martha Henderson had sewn Sarah a beautiful white dress, and Dakota wore a mix of traditional Comanche clothing and a white shirt that Sarah had made for him. Emma stood beside them holding Little Bird, beaming with joy. Napashni attended with several warriors, standing solemnly throughout the ceremony. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Dakota kissed Sarah tenderly, there was applause from both communities. John Preston was there too, standing in the back. He caught Sarah's eye and nodded with genuine respect before slipping out quietly. Sarah understood. He was letting go, accepting that she had found her path, even if it wasn't the one he had wanted for her. The wedding celebration that followed was unlike anything Broken Creek had ever seen. There was fiddle music and dancing alongside Comanche drums and traditional songs. Food from both cultures was shared, and children from both communities played together without the prejudices of their parents. It was a glimpse of what could be, a future where different peoples lived not just in tolerance, but in genuine harmony. That night, as Sarah lay in Dakota's arms in their home, listening to his steady heartbeat, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. It had started with fear, with her daughter running toward her and a warrior on horseback who should have been her enemy. But he had chosen peace, and so had she, and that single choice had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Dakota asked softly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how strange life is," Sarah replied, snuggling closer to him. 6 months ago I was alone and afraid, certain that I would spend the rest of my life struggling just to survive. And now I have you, and I have hope, and I have a purpose bigger than just getting through each day. Emma has a father who adores her. Our peoples have a chance at real peace. It's like a dream." "It is real," Dakota assured her, kissing the top of her head. "And we will work every day to keep it real, to nurture this peace like a precious seedling. Our children and their children will grow up in a different world than the one we knew, a world where love is stronger than hate, where understanding triumphs over fear." "Our children?" Sarah pulled back to look at him, a smile playing at her lips. Dakota's eyes sparkled with hope and love. "Yes, our children. If the spirits bless us, Emma will have brothers and sisters who carry the blood of both our peoples in their veins. They will be living proof that peace is possible, that love knows no boundaries." Sarah kissed him deeply, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Outside, the Texas night was peaceful and clear, stars shining brilliantly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and from the Comanche camp came the sound of singing. In the town, lamps glowed warmly in windows as families settled in for the night. Two worlds that had been at war were learning to coexist, all because one woman and one man had dared to see past their differences to the humanity within. As the months turned into years, the peace treaty that had begun as a 6-month trial became permanent. The story of Sarah and Dakota became legend, told around campfires and dinner tables as an example of courage, love, and the power of choosing peace over violence. They had 3 more children together, beautiful boys and girls who embodied the best of both cultures. Emma grew into a strong young woman who became a teacher, helping to educate children from both communities. Dakota became a respected voice for his people in the territorial government, ensuring that the Comanche were treated fairly in negotiations and agreements. Sarah worked alongside him, using her understanding of both worlds to bridge gaps and resolve conflicts before they could escalate into violence. Together, they built not just a life, but a legacy, proving that love could conquer hate, that understanding could overcome prejudice, and that peace was always possible when people chose courage over fear. Years later, when their grandchildren asked them to tell the story of how they met, Sarah and Dakota would sit together on the porch of their homestead, now expanded and prosperous, and recount that fateful day when Emma came running, fleeing from the silent Comanche warrior. They would tell of how that moment of fear transformed into the greatest love either of them had ever known, and how choosing peace, in that moment and every moment after, had changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. And the children would listen with wide eyes, marveling at the courage of their grandparents, inspired to carry forward the legacy of peace and love that had been fought for so hard and won at such great cost. The land that had once been stained with blood became a place of cooperation and mutual respect, where different peoples lived side by side, learning from each other, celebrating together, and building a future that honored both their pasts. That was the legacy of Sarah and Dakota, not just their love story, but the proof that peace was possible, that hatred could be overcome, and that the human heart was capable of bridging any divide when it chose love over fear. Their story became a beacon of hope, showing that even in the darkest times, even when all seemed lost, 2 people willing to stand together could change the world.